Awareness is by far the most essential thing for making changes in your life, whether it's your state, your relationships, your career, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. If you want to make some kind of change in your life in your desired direction, you need awareness. If you're trying to raise your consciousness, you need awareness. And without awareness, you're going to remain stuck in old patterns that do not serve you. Those old patterns are going to be things that you found a sense of familiarity in, security in, comfort in. And although they helped you at one point, they're not going to help you in where you're going. They're not going to help your evolution. You're going to have to leave some things behind in order to embrace something new, in order to evolve. And if you're stuck in the old, you're going to suffer because naturally you want to actually evolve. You actually want to raise your consciousness. You actually want to experience a higher version of yourself. This is a sort of deep human desire. And just being stuck in those old patterns and not doing anything about this is actually just going to cause suffering because there's needs for self-actualization and self-transcendence that aren't being met. And deep down, some part of you is going to recognize that, and there's going to be unnecessary suffering. So in this video, I want to share with you some of these ideas about how to actually make changes to your life and yourself. But I also want to paint a really clear picture about exactly how this kind of works so that you're not mistaken about any of these kinds of topics. So I want to start off by saying that when I say you need to be aware, I mean something very specific. Typically when we say I am aware of, let's say, this water bottle that I have right here, I'm aware of the water bottle, we aren't really practicing pure presence, which is something that you learn in meditation, in mindfulness meditation. What we're doing is we're actually just in thought. We're actually just asserting something that we know, which is very different from pure presence. Right now, if you just kind of shut your eyes and you just watch the thoughts going through your mind, you'll recognize that there's just a witness to this experience. And this witness does not judge, interpret, claim anything. It's just there watching. That pure watching is the thing to get in tune with rather than being lost in thoughts. This is why people practice meditation, so that they can get more in touch with this pure presence. So essentially, awareness is much greater than just knowledge or thought. Knowledge and thought are something that are occurring inside of awareness, and your awareness itself, once you're really in touch with it, there's an element of just pure clarity to it. Often our state is actually highly unclear. Our thoughts are not very clear. Our emotions are kind of like mucky. The way to get real clarity is through awareness, through raising your consciousness. Not by just being lost in thoughts. Being lost in thought is actually a very unclear state. And this becomes very obvious the second you can see the contrast in these two different experiences. So awareness itself can kind of move back from a particular emotion or thought stream that we're kind of caught up in. So usually when we're very reactive and we're very identified with the ego, we feel very contracted. We don't really feel in touch with pure presence. Instead, we're kind of just acting from survival. We're actually just kind of stuck in those old patterns, those old reactive patterns and stories and beliefs and emotions, right? We're kind of acting from there rather than from presence, which is needed to make a deep, genuine change in your life. So awareness has the capacity to kind of just take a step back, to have this higher or larger perspective that just being stuck in the pattern doesn't give you. And what I'm saying is that larger perspective that you get simply by purely witnessing is completely essential for actually making a very deep and lasting change. Not only that, but awareness can actually penetrate the subtle details of experience, the subtle sensations, the subtle energies, the subtle thoughts and stories occurring in the background that you don't even know are happening. All this stuff is actually controlling you. You don't even recognize that it's actually happening. Awareness itself is always present. So in any particular experience, you can kind of just wake up. And a big part of actually making a lasting change is to catch yourself in the act of being stuck in the pattern that you're stuck in, which is very difficult because in that moment, that's when you're the most unconscious. That's when you're the most on autopilot. That's when you're stuck the most in those old patterns. And that's when you're the most unwilling to change. That's when you're the most just stuck in the thing that you don't want to be stuck in. That's typically when we want to avoid the most. That's typically when we're resisting the most. And by waking up in those crucial moments, you begin to break the pattern. Not that the whole pattern is going to dismantle all at once. Typically, change happens gradually and over time. There's usually a process. But each time when you're enacting the pattern, you're getting triggered, you're getting frustrated, you find yourself doing the same thing over and over again that doesn't work, the same problems keep arising, the more you can actually catch yourself in the act of doing these things, the easier it's going to be to break the pattern. And you need some kind of way to actually ensure that you are going to catch yourself in these patterns. That's why it's important to practice meditation, mindfulness meditation every single day. So that instead of just waking up and then brushing your teeth and doing this and doing that and doing that, instead of basically waking up and you're just like stuck in the same old, all the patterns just kind of come online as your day goes about and nothing ever really changes, right? Instead of just essentially remaining stuck, you have some kind of structured and dedicated time to just being awake, to being clear, to watching thoughts, to watching feelings, rather than being so absorbed in them. We find our whole sense of self and identity in thoughts and feelings, etc. But the ego is an illusion. The self, our psychological and social self, is an illusion. It's a mental construct. It's not something that's just existing objectively and here I am. It's something that our minds actually invent. So awareness is stable and continuous. No matter how much our thoughts or our emotions throw us off, you'll actually recognize that below that state that you're experiencing, there's always awareness. Right? Stable and continuous. Regardless of what is happening in the present, you can always just simply return to being aware. So cultivating this clear, fluid, and flexible awareness enables us to actually take on life's challenges or whatever arises. Because if you're stuck in a reactive pattern or an emotion or a story you have in your mind, your ability to actually take on life's challenges is going to be hindered. Your ability to grow is going to be hindered. Your very development as a human being is going to be hindered. Awareness opens you up where you're closed. Awareness allows you to be flexible where you're rigid. Awareness allows you to be clear where you are foggy and unclear. And typically, whenever we have some kind of challenge or something difficult arises, we get reactive. We basically escape into the old patterns. And it's in those moments, like I said, where we have to wake up. Recognize that we've went unconscious. It's in the midst of your reactivity, in the midst of your fight in your relationship, where you have to recognize, oh, I'm asleep. I'm just sleepwalking. This is my autopilot pattern just doing its thing. I'm not present. I'm not conscious. Right now, I'm just lost. I'm not clear, I'm not sharp, I'm not present, I'm not grounded. Right? It's those core crucial moments that are the most important. That's going to cause major disruptions in your patterns, in how you kind of go about reenacting them. So essentially, when you're stuck in those reactive patterns, you just simply can't meet life's challenges. You're so much more likely to just shut down rather than open up and learn how to use every experience as an opportunity to open up further, to learn. Rather than using every experience to deepen your awareness, you shut down and you try and go back into the old unconscious ways. You're trying to erase your presence and connection to the moment. you're trying to like go back to sleep and just forget that this whole life thing ever even happened. So instead of continuing to essentially be tossed around by any kind of turbulent thought or emotion, you can actually just let your awareness move kind of back, right? You can just be the witness of what's going on, and you can just simply acknowledge, let's say, pain that you're experiencing, reactivity in your relationship. You can acknowledge it. You can recognize that this is not who I actually am. Not as a way to disassociate, but as a way to actually just disentangle your ego from it, disentangle your sense of identity from it, so that you can actually come back to meet it fully. You become the witness so that you can actually move back into the experience fully feeling it, fully applying attention, fully applying presence, right? This is something you'll have to practice, but for now, just being the witness is a perfect place to actually start. So when you're able to just let your awareness move back rather than being so entangled with the thoughts, the emotions, things like this, you just acknowledge what is happening. You now have the chance to not be in the reactive cycle. You have the chance to not avoid, not resist, not fight against. You're essentially creating more space for yourself, more psychological, emotional space. You're no longer trapped in the old. The second you do this, you're just not trapped in the old anymore. You're making the change. So you can step out of resistance and basically face whatever is occurring more directly the second that you actually create this kind of inner psychological space for yourself. So becoming aware is extremely simple, but it's also not very simple because we have so much investment in maintaining and promoting this like old paradigm that we have, the old patterns, the old self, old thoughts, old beliefs, old emotions. We have so much investment in just allowing it to just reproduce itself over and over and over again. Right? The whole becoming aware thing isn't rocket science, but it's just the fact that you're so stuck in the old that without practicing waking up, it's just impossible. You'll find yourself just stuck in the autopilot. So we perpetuate this, all this, these repetitive and reactive patterns, we perpetuate this through repetitive stories that we actually tell ourselves about who I am, how things work, etc. In the back of your mind, there's dozens of interconnected narratives. There's a whole worldview that's actually controlling you, and connected to that worldview are a bunch of deep unconscious feelings, emotions, energies for the most part. And these stories are basically stories. They're mental fabrications, they're judgments, they're interpretations, and they put whatever's happening in the present into a familiar framework so that we can feel comfortable, we can feel secure. But if we're trying to change, putting things into the same context isn't really going to work. If we're trying to make a deep fundamental change, the same old isn't going to work. If we're trying to free ourselves of unnecessary suffering, that same old is just not going to work. We need some way to wake up in the actual present experience. And we usually don't recognize that these stories are things that we invent. These stories are mental constructs. They're not existing in reality. They're existing as a byproduct of our human mind, something that we create and we believe in. And we don't recognize that they're created. We, in fact, think the opposite. We think that they are reality. We think that they represent reality when they don't. When they're the byproduct more so of emotional wounds, psychological tendencies, life experiences, and then just certain conclusions that we've come to due to a lot of these kinds of factors. It's not something just objectively existing there and that's just what it is. It's something our minds invent. And these stories, like I said, often operate in the background of our mind. They are subconscious. And the less aware you are of how they control you, the more difficult it's going to be to actually break free. The more you're going to be locked in the old patterns. So a lot of these kind of old beliefs, stuck energies, emotions, all this stuff, stories, reactive patterns, it can be quite heavy. I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that this old stuff can be heavy. It's something that we've been carrying around for a long time. It doesn't serve a purpose in the present. It's like a broken broken system just repeating itself over and over and over again. And this heaviness acts as a filter and kind of just obscures our perception of life. It actually makes us very unclear. It actually obscures the natural clarity of just pure presence, pure awareness, like I was talking about previously. It obscures the fluidity and the flow of life, the flow of just pure awareness. And essentially, we need to catch ourselves in the act of constructing these kinds of stories. You need some kind of way to just shine its pure attention, pure awareness on your mind, on your body and its tensions and your emotions. And if you have no way to practice that, can you kind of intuit how they're just going to keep perpetuating themselves? So you need some kind of way to actually catch yourselves in the act of constructing these stories and simply see through them and just return to that very basic, simple, present moment awareness. So it's like the mind's constructing story after story after story. And there's a bunch of emotions there. There's tensions in the body. It's this whole bundle of resistance, mental, emotional, and physiological resistance. You need some kind of way to snap out of it, become aware, see through this, recognize what's happening. I'm resisting, I'm struggling, right? These are the old narratives, right? Some way to just see clearly what's happening. And then just return to simple present moment awareness. And from this aware place, you now have the freedom to make a new choice. You now have the freedom to actually create a new pattern. But I would recommend deeply resting in that pure awareness. Get very familiar with just simply resting in awareness. Feels pretty good. And you honestly deserve to rest there if you've never done that before. So at any moment, we can actually shift from thought to awareness, which is the larger space in which thoughts arise. Thoughts are such a small thing occurring within experience, and awareness is the sort of larger context in which thoughts are arising, and awareness is ever present, here now. You always have the opportunity to shift to simply being present, being the witness, not thought, not the reactive pattern. And the more that you can just practice remaining present as just that pure witness, those patterns, they loosen their grip on you. And it's a very tight grip. It's constricting. It's like squeezing. They can still arise, but when they do arise, now the grip isn't as strong. You're able to just be the witness in the midst of those experiences. And it starts to lose its power over time to the point where they stop arising. The patterns dismantle themselves just by you observing them closely with just pure attention shining on them. So we begin to witness how we are continually making up stories about who we are, what we are doing, and what will happen next. And this is just something we notice as we just pay attention to our mind. And at other times, we discover a wider, deeper quality of ongoing awareness, which is clear, fluid, and continuous, like a steady stream flowing underneath all our various states of mind. So at one moment, we can feel very constricted and contracted by all the psychological, emotional buildup that we're holding on to. And then the next moment, as we're able to practice being present, we can sense this kind of underlying flow and just stream of energy and stream of just pure awareness. And you need to feel that contrast in your experience so that you can kind of differentiate between them. So we start to develop a healthy skepticism towards the things that our mind dictates. And instead of just believing the nonstop chatter of the mind, we actually develop a more discriminating awareness. We can see that the mind is actually full of self-deceptions and ways to keep itself stuck and trapped in the old patterns for safety. So by learning to just have that pure observation without judgment, observation without thought, you're weakening the pattern. You're weakening its hold on you. You're weakening your attachment to it. You're weakening all the emotions that hold it together. You're processing them. You're weakening your sense of identity with it. And naturally, you'll shift to something that's more aligned with you. Right, I want you to keep in mind this one simple point. Thought is not awareness. Thought is not the witness. There's a difference between saying, yeah, I'm aware of it, and then actually just observing and watching it. There's a difference between saying, yeah, I'm aware of my hand, versus actually sitting there and just being fully present with it without judgment, just seeing it and allowing the intelligence of life to just start to rearrange and change it. Awareness is like your far more larger intelligence, far more intelligent than your sort of just everyday logical mind. So there's an element of trust as well, that as you apply attention, right, and you have a very sincere approach to this, right, you can just trust and surrender in the process. There's almost like nothing more to do. Not in the sense that you can't, get up and, let's say, make any kind of situation better for yourself, but nothing more to do in the sense that by following this path of being deeply aware, you will notice all the things that you need to notice in order to make the changes necessary. You can trust this process. That's it for this video. If you're interested in working one-to-one with me, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Take it easy.